Hello, this video is going to be an instructional session on how to install and run the Docker container version of the GIS portal. The portal itself is a visualization and analysis tool for looking at geospatial data, and we're not going to look at how the portal works. There are a couple of other videos that go into detail about how to use the portal. This session is aimed at people wanting to install it on their own server using the Docker container version. So we're assuming here you have a kind of basic understanding of how to work Docker, and you've got the Docker software already installed on your machine. So I'm actually running this on my Mac, but I'm connected to a Linux server that's running Docker. So I can start by pulling the container is the first thing to do. So I start with docker pull pml rsg/gis portal, and that will pull the image from the Docker hub and add it to my machine. Now, depending on how good your connection is, this may take a few minutes. I'm going to fast forward this bit because it's not particularly interesting. So there we have it. The pull command is complete. It's downloaded all the sections of the container that it needs and it's extracted them. So now if I do Docker images, it will show me that I've got the PML-RSG latest version. Now, if you have a look on the Docker hub page for this container, it will talk you through the instructions. So one of the things that we want to do first is create a directory on our host machine which will be used to store all the configuration files. We want to do this on the host machine so that when the container stops you don't lose all of your configuration files, and they can be backed up as well. So we're going to make a directory. The directory can be anywhere you want it to be. But for this demonstration we'll make a directory in /user/share/GISportal. Okay, and then the first time we run the container we need to run it in interactive mode because there are a few things that we need to configure within the container, and this will create the config files in the directory we just created. So for the sake of ease I'm going to copy this command. And paste that in here. So this is saying docker run, -v is the volume, so we're mounting the folder that we just created using this volume which has been defined within the container. The -e means it's interactive. The T is specifying the tag of the container we want to run, and this last part is the script that we're going to run inside the container. So if we run that, it will create the container and then start the script. So at this point you'll be led through an interactive process that will allow you to configure your portal for the first time. So as a first run we're going to run it without any domain name. We're just going to run it locally on our machine and it will run on a particular port. So for now we can say no, we don't want to run on a domain with authentication, and it will go through the task of building some basic configuration files, and when it's done it will give us a command then to run. So the container has run and it's exited, and you'll see here it says the installation steps complete, so I can now run docker run. So if I copy this command and paste it, this will run the container in normal mode. So now what I have is a running container. And you'll see in the command that I ran, this bit here, this is port forwarding. So I'm forwarding our local host port 6789 to port 6789 within the container. So if I go to a browser now and I enter the IP address of the server that I'm running it on and go to 6789, I'll see the welcome page of the portal. So at this stage it's got no data in it. So I can start building a map, but I don't have any data. So if I go onto the layers tab, for example, there's nothing there. But what I can do is go and find a data source. So we want a WMS server. So I'm going to take some ocean color data. So we take monthly. This is a web map server. and I'm going to copy this URL and paste it into this box here. And what that will do is it will go off and find the data that are available at that URL and populate this drop down. So once I've got to this stage, I can load up datasets and move around them both spatially and temporally. So this is fine, we've got the container running. What I can do now is I can stop that container by saying docker stop and then giving it the name that you see on the end of this line here. That'll stop the container. I'll still have the image on my machine, and so I can still restart the container. But because I didn't do any of the setup at the start, and I didn't register it with a domain name, and I didn't add any authentication methods, when I restart the container, the data that I've added, so this data set here, won't be available to me again. So we're going to run through the process of creating the container again, but this time we're going to run through it with the domain name setup and the authentication things as well. So if I'm going to go back up here, so this is the first Docker run command we used, and so this is going to start in interactive mode, and it's going to run the Docker install script. So at this point I'm going to say yes, I want to set up a domain with authentication. I'm not going to worry about SSL. If you have an SSL certificate, obviously it's advisable to use one, but it doesn't matter if you don't. Then you have to enter the domain name. So the domain name for this machine is pmpc1465.npm.ac.uk, and my email address. Now the email address is going to be linked to an admin account, and the admin account will allow you to log into the portal and add data layers as well as save them and change some information about how the layers are displayed to users and who gets to see what. So you need to have your email address linked with an admin account. So this is the email address also has to be linked to a Google account, and that's the next part of the process. We're going to use OAuth from Google, or using Google as a provider of authentication, and there is a nice tutorial about how to get OAuth settings at this URL here, and there's details of how to, where you actually need to go to get the settings. So it's offered me two pieces of information here. You'll need these when you create the authentication key, and what you'll get is if you go to the developer console of Google and create the client ID, you'll get back a client ID, which I'm going to copy and paste that in there, and it'll also give me a client secret, which again I'm going to copy and paste that in there. So it goes through the same process then of building the container and exiting. So again I can run it now in normal mode using this command. Now on this machine I already have in place an instance of Nginx web server that's set up to proxy requests on port 80 to port 6789, sorry. So now when I go to a new window, I go to pmpc1465, I get the same portal. It's got no data in it again, but now it's got a login button. So I can now sign in using my Google account, and that's signed me in as an administrator. So clicking on the display settings tab I've got an additional button here so I can configure the layers that live within the portal on a more permanent basis. So we'll start by again adding the WMS URL for the ocean color data. I'll pop that in here. So again, it goes off to the server, finds details of which data are available at that address, and it gives you a drop-down list with all the data. So as I did before, I can select a layer and load it onto the map. But now I've got the opportunity to save the data. So I can add these layers and I can edit some of the information about the layers and decide whether or not to show all of them, or maybe hide some of them. So we'll change the provider as a first task. So the data have actually come from the European Space Agency, so we'll say ESA in there. That's fine. Now at the moment, because I've added the layer belongs to me. I can change the owner to global, and that means that anyone else that's coming to this portal will also be able to see these data. So we're going to say, well, it's ocean color, so I'll put that in the indicator type. And this button here on the end does copy to all. So that will copy the value to every other indicator in this data set, of which there are 90. Now I know it's global, so I'll add global as a tag as well. This data set happens to be monthly, so I'll add that too. And then we've got the scale bar. Now the scale bar, this is the default scale bar I've got that comes from the data server, so I can tweak this slightly. I say, well, actually I just want the color bar, and if we put some scale points, and we'll change the height and rotate it, it looks a lot nicer like that. And I'll copy that to all the others as well. So at this point I can use this paging system to scroll through other layers, or I can use the left and right arrow keys. You can go through and add as much detail to the indicators as you want to, and when you've finished, if you hit submit layers, that will take all the information that you've provided and it will save it in a configuration file in your volume that you've mounted with the container. So if we go back to our command line and we go to the volume, or the folder we created to mount the volume in, and have a look in here, there's basic configuration, and then in site settings we have site-specific settings for the 2 versions of the portal that we've run. Right, so at this stage, if I do docker ps, it will tell me that I've got a container running. So if I stop this container, and then I go back to my browser and try and reload it, Nginx will tell me that there's no container there. Essentially, it can't find the target for the proxy. But because we configured the domain interactively and we set up authentication using Google OAuth, and our configuration files have been saved on our local host, when we do docker run again, it will remember, or it will pick up all the configuration files. And so when I reload, you're going to get a second or two. When I reload and go back to the map, I've already got all my ocean color data in there that I added last time. Okay, by this stage you should have an idea of how to download the image, run the container interactively the first time to set it up, how to add the configuration for Google OAuth, and then how to run the container